Hello world, it's Sammy. Now in today's video, we're talking on an underrated yet important concept, which is how to structure your Python project. Now I get this particular question a lot, either via DMs on WhatsApp, via Twitter, via mails, all sorts. Like, Sammy, how do I structure my project? I know what to build, but then I don't know how to go about it. And I find myself always repeating the same thing over and over again. So yeah, I thought to myself, hey, I'll just bundle this in a video so that everyone can just have access to it, and then they could actually start from there. All right, guys. So when we talk about structuring your project, by me saying structure, I mean how best are you able to make decision that best fits the kind of project that you are building. Because I might decide to take on a project, let's just say a project that calculates mean media mode now. The way I'm going to attack that particular project will be different from someone in which is trying to build a web application, or someone in which trying to build a project that actually takes a census of a particular country or a particular class or a particular jurisdiction. I don't know if you understand. So the way you structure your project should be the way that best fits your project. However, you should keep some certain things in mind. One of those is making it as concise as possible, making it very, very clear, making it very, very readable, and also making the way in which you arrange your file system very, very readable and understandable right from the get-go. Okay, now you might now want to ask me, okay, then how best can I just at least start, right? Okay, so I'm going to be attacking this from three different perspectives. Number one, let's say again, I am just trying to give us like heads up. Now let's say you are trying to build a a yeah, let's go back to the previous example. I said a script that actually calculates mean median mode. Now I said a script. So basically, if you are just trying to write a file or just trying to build something that does a particular thing, and it's a one-off something, just a one-off, like what I just said, building writing a script that calculates mean median mode, right? That basic statistics. Now the kind of file structure that you would want, okay, quickly I'll make a directory called I think I will delete this later. Let's just say py structure. Okay, then I like to see it into py structure. All right, so currently now I have nothing here now. So now let's say on this py structure, or let's just say in place of this py structure, I have my project, my GitHub repository, or the project, the main project itself. Let's say the main project here is main media mode, right? Okay, so first things first, you want to actually start off is actually creating your git ignore file. So this is my git ignore. Then you also want to create your readme. These are the basics one that you will need to do. Then after this, after creating your readme, then the next thing you actually want to do is to create your test first. Then your test.py, like your test data that you're actually using to test this, right? And then you might also want to your test file rather. They might also want to create your test data. Let's call this now test.csv or test.txt, meaning this is the text file and this will be the test. This is the test data and this is the test file. This is the test data. Now this is like the very first things you want to do. So if I do 3 and I do this, okay, I have to use the a flag here so you can see the git ignore. Okay, cool. So this is the very first one you'd want to do, get first. Now that you've gotten this, now what you now need to do now is to then create that particular file and start writing your code or start writing your functions that does that particular thing. So let's say this now becomes main. Let's call this main median the pi. Or instead of main median the pi, let's just call this hello world, because that's what I'm just going to write here. So let's just call this hello world the pi. Ooh, I think I wrote W there. Alright, I'm going to change that later on. Okay, so let's just say this is what we have, and then in this here I'm not importing anything. I'm just saying then my documentation for this particular module, let's just say a Python script that prints hello world, right? Then probably you want to add your name or whatever, or let's say you want to give more description on how it works. Then you can just put more description. Let's just say in this case, this script or let's say this script prints hello world with the name of the user. Okay, or we could still decide to modify this to kind of print hello world when no argument is passed, and hello Sammy when an argument is passed, something like that. And then we could just create, let's just say the greeting, let's just say greeting, and then let this be the name. Then a documentation that says greets the user. That's all. Then I would just say, should I just return? No, let's just print here. Let's just print I'll use f strings here now. Okay, we'll then say hello, then name. Okay, then okay, cool. Then I'll just do if name equal main, then I'll just call greeting. Let's just say this is what we have here first. Let's say this is what we have, right? And then I close this. Cool. So let's just say this is what we have. Now if we run this, yeah, I said I was actually going to change the name. Yeah. Okay, so I'll just clear this. Then okay. Oh, sorry. My bad. Or to still kind of do this, I can still come in here and pass in a default argument here and say semi to kind of tackle that. But let's just leave it this way. Let's leave it this way. And here you can see hello Sammy. So basically, this particular script now is not doing much, right? It's not doing much. But then if you look at the tree now, look at the tree. So what I now have is my main script, the test, that definitely there's nothing here now. Then the test data. Let's say you are just creating a one-off script. Then this is your go-to file structure that you could use. Now you could decide to make this much more. You could decide to add more flesh to it by probably you want to add a custom. Let's say you want this your readme to be everything that has everything that has to do with the project installation, project setup. But then let's say you want to provide more information about the information, about the particular script. Then you can create a file. I'm using the touch command because it's just basically written I'm creating an empty file now. Okay, so you can now use the you could now create a another file, or it might even be a folder, but based on the fact that this is just a simple one of script that it's really not really too complex. Yeah, it's just minimalistic. You could create a docs file for it. You can just select docs and then docs.md like that. So this is now going to be like hold all the necessary documentations about it. Now let's also say again that let's just create this. Now let's also assume that in this your hello world, Python file, you are actually using some modules that are not built-in. Now you do know that in built-in module you really do not need to import them with pip, like you really do not need to install them like pip install this. They're like they come in natively with Python, right? So if you are using built-in, if you're sorry all right, sorry about that. So if you're actually using those built-in modules, now there would not be a need for creating a requirement.txt file, because you are 100% sure that once the person has Python installed and the person runs the particular program, is he or she is definitely going to have it up and running, right? But now let's say you used additional packages or additional modules to write this particular script. Let's say you use pandas, you use numpy, you use matplotlib, or whatever Python package you actually installed. Then you would now need to create the requirement.txt. So touch requirement.txt. Now you can see the way I'm providing reasons for whatever actions I am taking. Now this will now be my file structure or my file system now for this particular project. Okay. So now let's assume now that we now want to create a tool, like a tool, yeah, like a really complex and advanced tool. Okay, now we are now going to be branching off from this particular structure. So I'll create a directory called let's just create a directory called tool. Then I'll need to seed into tool. Okay, so let's say this is our tool. Now it's empty. Okay, now again I will need to start with my git ignore. The reason why you need to put this dot, you need to really start with the git ignore, because as you kind of move through the development process, you might forget some certain things, like you don't really need to push to GitHub. So this .git ignore file basically going to tell GitHub that okay, the certain files or the certain, you can still use regex too in your git ignore. Yeah, so the certain files that are in this particular git ignore file, GitHub is just going to ignore them. And when you kind of do a git add, git commit, and git push for people that normally does this git add dot, then let's just say git add the file name. If you are using this now, so instead of git now to add all the files in the current directory, because that's what the dot means, it's now going to exclude those files in the git ignore in your git ignore file. Okay. Sorry, just a second. Okay. All right, sorry about that. Okay, so now I will need to start with my git ignore, then my readme again, then my readme. Then I also want to now start with in this case my requirement.txt, because I said now this is now like a big file, right? A big project. So let's just say, and it's still like a tool. So the require is a Python tool. So requirement.txt, and then let's say, okay, and now this is also cool. Now if you do your tree for this is what you now have, like from your very first startup. Good. Now the next thing you want to do, remember, you need to do planning, because before you actually move to actually going to write those particular, before you even start thinking about how you should structure your this, you should have thought about your project. You should have planned it out. Like there is a stage before this particular stage we are in right now, and it's the previous stage that actually gives you a good information about your current stage now, about structuring that particular project. Okay, so now let's say I'm actually building a tool now I have done this like get go. Now if you're actually going to building a strictly Python tool now, right, and it's really really big, now you might want to now create your tool directory. Let's say most times the people like calling it my app, or the name of the app. Let's just call it to app. You want to create that directory. Then you also want to create the test. Now remember here, now the test here was a file or was just a Python module. Yeah, but now this is now a direction on its own called tests. Now in this test will now contain all the test cases that you are using to test this your tool app. Hope that is clear. All right, now after this test, now you might now, depending, let's say you have some binary files, or yeah, some binary file, and they are not really really bulky. Now if they are bulky, you might want to create a custom file for you and call it bin, and then put all the binaries there. But if they are not really bulky, then you could even decide to create a setup file, a setup.py, and then put all the necessary setup there. So I'll create this. So now if we go back to tree, so now you can see this is what we have. Now if I kind of do this, yeah, so this is now what we have, right? So this is the tool app, the test requirements, this, and the git ignore. Now let's say you actually want to still create some authors and all that. Then again you create an authors. Again, this should be in caps. An authors.md. Let's say you want to put it in MD file in markdown. Then and also your documentation. Again, you can decide to make it just a doc, like this, like sorry, this should be in caps, docs.md, or you can decide to go for the folder route, like you can decide to go down this route, or you can decide to go down this particular route here. Let's do this first. Then so you have docs.md here, or you could decide to then go down this particular route by creating a custom page, a custom folder for docs. Then I'll just move my docs to this, and then if I repeat this same tree, now you can see So you could decide to do something like this. It's up to you. And like so, you can see we are already arriving at a very, very neat and clean structure that anybody that comes to this particular GitHub repository sees this, and right off, like straight from from first glance, he or she already understands, okay, this is, if I'm looking for this, because the thing is, nobody really has the time to go and start looking for things for you. And most times, even if you're the one that actually built that, so there are sometimes in which you forget where some stuff are, especially when it's a really, really big project. But then if you are taking your due diligence in structuring that particular project out properly, you see that it's much more easier for you to navigate your way around the different sections of that particular project. And so this thing continues to go on. Now it is now, you can see it is based on what I want, right? Based on what I like, this I didn't even bother on researching about this particular topic also. And yeah, before I actually post this video, I think I'll just try and grab a few articles that I can lay my hands on to just kind of reinforce knowledge. But then this is basically how I'm just going to attack this particular situation now. Okay, now now let's say we are now building a Flax project now, because most times you might want to be building a web application now, not really a tool. Now this can continue, this particular structure now can continue to grow based on your needs. Now you can have in this tool application, you could have sub folders, like in this tool app now, you could decide to have a particular folder that is, remember, let's just say we are creating, okay, let's just say we are creating a tool now that helps us get the total statistics of a particular country, right? So in this particular tool app now, you can have a directory called stats that will help you, that hold functions on how to get status of this part and this part, stuff like that. You can see you could have more, but then it is now much more organized, and it goes on like that. But now let's say you want to now create a Flax project. So let's just create another directory. Let's just say this should be Flax project, and then I'm going to seed in into that. Okay, so what have we covered thus far? Okay, go back. Oh great, sorry. Okay, so we've covered for the normal project. I think I would still need to move this part, because this is only considering a situation whereby it is just a one-off script. Okay, so let's see, go back to our Flax project, and then let's clear our screen so that we will have a clean slate. So now let's say this is our Flax project, a web application. Now in this, it is also based on what your application is trying to achieve. Now if your application has your application is a full-fledged application that has both the back end and the front end part of it, right? Okay, you now have to like structure. Now yes, in this particular case now, you can now decide to structure this either as a package, or as a Flax blueprint. Now that's what they call Flax blueprint. However, me personally, I have not actually started up a project by my own self from scratch and use the Flax blueprint method. However, I have actually contributed to a project that was started up using Flax blueprint, and it's still the same. Basically it's still the same concept. Yeah. Okay, so concerning the Flags blueprint, I'm still going to drop an article, a new article that I could find. I'll just drop it out. But then the concepts are really relatable. Okay, So now let's say you are actually trying to build a Flask project now. Um, let's say a web application or a to-do list now, and it's a full-fledged containing both the back end and the front end, right? Now for the back end aspect of it, you do know that you will now again you want to create your git ignore file, then your readme .md, then your requirements that you've already said why this requirement.txt is necessary, because definitely you're creating a web application, so you're actually going to be putting you're actually going to be pip installing some dependencies, so definitely you really want to put this here. Okay, so this is the three ones me I always start off from this three here. Okay, and then I can now decide to branch off and continue. So now let's say I would also need to provide some I will also need to write a script now that also install this for the client on auto. Now you could now decide to now write this install.sh script. Definitely this is a shell script, or you could still decide to use the setup. You could still decide to use setup.py, like so. So this is what I have now. All right, now this is just the files, right? Now what about the nitty gritty about my particular project? Again, if it's you really want to give a detailed documentation about each and every section, you could decide to create a directory called called docs. If you don't, you could decide if you don't want to them, you might want to put them into this readme. But most times, I think this is most times for me, not even most times, for me, I really prefer this way, because I just know, okay, this readme is basically telling them how to use my particular project. And even in most organizations, like the two privileged organizations I'm been able to work with, basically they don't add the readme doesn't contain all documentation about each this thing. No, you actually have it in the docs folder. Then in the docs folder you then have different sections, different documentation sections that is related to a particular code base section, or a part in the code base. Okay, so this is now what we have. So go back to my tree. So this is now what we have. Now let's say it is a full-fledged application and containing both the front end and the back end, right? Okay, so for the front end, as for the back end aspect, now let's say you want a place whereby you want to put your database and all that. So you could create a file. You could decide to go down this route by creating a file called db.py. You could decide to go down this part if it's just really a simple stuff, or you could decide to go down this part and like this. You can, oh, this I will need to remove this, then make it a directory instead. Yeah, you could decide to go down this part. Now in these models, then you could now have all your different models that now holds for your database. So you could decide to now have models db.py, of which this is the way this is my go-to method actually, models.py. Then for your classes, now you could now have models. For let's say you have a base model. Now let's say this is basically setting up your database and all that, but then now let's say you creating a class for your user, you can now have users.py, and like so. But let's just use this too for now. You can see I'm just basically making an assumptions here, of which you can't you will need to go back and actually plan out your project. I am always emphasizing on planning it out before you figure out the structure, because the structure you choose depends on how well you're able to plan your project. And you can say I'm taking my time out to actually explain all this concept to you all. Okay, so now let's say this is for my database now. Now, the next thing again, you want to now start figuring out, or not even figuring out now. The next thing that you want to do now is to then go and start housing your front end aspect, right? Now, since this is a Flax project, you could decide to go down, although I don't advise this, but then I see this yeah, I see this a lot, and then it's still cool, really. It's still cool. Although I don't advise, but then I see this a lot. It's still cool. So you could now decide to now create, you can now decide to say, okay, front end part of it. Try to do go front end, make it a directory called front end, and in this front end, use the piece so that I can just create everything once. Now in this front end, you could now have let's say your statics, to host your static file. Then in your front end again, you will now have your scripts that is holding your scripts. Then in the front end, you could decide to have templates. Okay, then you will still need to now create your tests. You still need to create your test. Now if we go back to our tree, you can see now this is what I now have: my models for this, then my test for my front end. But you could decide not to use this front end part. Now you could decide to just take this to the main level. Yeah, your script, your statics, your template. Or you could decide to call, instead of front, you could decide to call this main, or you could decide to call this the name of your application. You could decide to call this the app this way, and then it's actually fine. It, like I said earlier, it's based on you. It's based on you and how well you are able to structure your particular project. Now in this test, now you will now need to, definitely you will need to write tests for your DB, tests for your users. So you can now see it's now growing. Now in this particular, let's say you call this, or let's just say we leave it at front as front end. Now this is for your script, statics, templates. Yeah, you probably need a another directory now called main, that will now house your main logic. Yeah, or yeah, you could just go down this way. However, for me personally, for me, you could go with this and then you're actually cool. But for me, the way I like structuring my web projects, anything in my web project, this is the way I often structure my project. Now I create a directory called src. Now this src is basically standing as my source directory. That means because I really like things being cool and neat. Like, so when someone comes to, so okay, so the first thing I want to do now in this particular source, then I'm going to move my models, not docs, models, and yep, I'm going to move it to my source. Now this is basically the kind of structure personally I love, because this source now everything that I have now, when they click on my project readme now, sorry, on my project's repository, on my project GitHub repository, the only thing now they see is the readme, the documentation, probably the installation script to kind of install all the necessary packages, the dependencies, my test cases. And then this src is basically telling, okay, the source code or the code base itself. Now if they now look into my source, if they now look into my source, I just kind of specify. Sometimes I go with this front end. Sometimes I go with this front end and then front end, back end. I just kind of split it that way, front end, back end. Then the back end, I have my models and all that. But sometimes I just go with on this particular source. Then I now have my different sections. Let's say again src. In this case I'll use p, or no need, since src is already existing. Okay, so I will then create, sometimes I'll go with models. Then instead of this, I will then go with I'll then write something like web flags, like this. But then if I'm removing this web flags, I'm going to also remove the front end. If I'm adding web flags, I'm going to remove the front end. Remember I said that sometimes I go with front end, back end. Then the back end I have my models and everything that controls my back end. Then on my front end I have everything that controls my front end. That's kind of the way I like. Sometimes I just structure it so that if I want to kind of fix a particular structure, place, I already know, okay, this place, and I get there quickly. Okay, I think we should just go with I'll remove this. I'll remove the front end. So I'll remove the front end, and then if I have, okay, so I will have my models, and most times in this models you have your init.py. I forgot to add that, so I think I should just add that now. Models, then on my web flags. Now on my web flags, now the same thing. So again, I will definitely need, on my web flags now, I will now have my templates, my stats, my init.py, my application entry point, which is the app, or which sometimes you call main. So let's just say I do this again, then src the, no, this should not be in the models, instead it should be in the web flags. So src web flags. Then I will then have my application entry point, or sometimes you can call it main.py. Then let's say you on this your web flags again. So now it's not, from here you can now start adding those your directories, your files, and everything you really need. And you can see now, this is my go-to structure. Already I have for my models, everything that has to do with my models. I have for my main application, for my main application, the main. Sometimes this main is a folder for me. Main is a folder depending on what I'm trying to achieve. Okay. Yeah, so this is kind of a way I would definitely go about my product. And then yes, there's also a way you could actually structure your Django application. Now I have not started using Django as of this point of recording, so I wouldn't know how best you could go about, but I still think the whole idea is still relatable. All right. If you have any questions, drop them in the comment section. And yeah, thank you guys for staying through. Bye bye.